Okay.
Yeah, no, it was unreal. It's like a story that we just wasn't long story short, she got pneumonia and hospitalized. So then I went on social and asked for recommendations to people locally. It's not got 5 of them, got down the path with I'm going to see one to get them. Got really far down the path with one person. At the end of the day, and she showed it to me. I officially started going to see the doctor so I don't give it away. I was like, no. Okay, so then after that one, I started doing it. It was
Okay.
All right. Prior to our meeting, we do, and there's chairs in here if people still want to make their way in. There's chairs in the front, or there's chairs in 2044, and we can grab those, and people can sit as well. So prior to our meeting, we do have an invocation. So Pastor Dave Zimmerman is here from River Valley Alliance Church. Pastor.
I don't want to have my back to the crowd here, but as I was preparing this afternoon, I did not know we would have our city government, our police department, and our fire department here tonight. So I think we'll see that God was at work as I prepared these comments in advance. But my wife Nancy and I recently attended a retreat to help caregivers combat the trauma and the burnout that they go through in caring for people in times of need. And the leader began the retreat with talking about 5 other pandemics that have occurred because of the recent COVID pandemic. And the 5 additional pandemics that he talked about included rampant depression, distrust of institutions. I don't know if anyone in this room has ever gone through that kind of thing. Deep divisions of our society along political lines. A freedom, I don't understand this one, a freedom to defame others, which has largely been fueled by social media. And a disorientation that has resulted from just our busy way of life. And individuals have much less time to process what they're going through. Well, we can try all sorts of things, and I applaud all of you for the things that you try and the many other caregivers in our community. I think we know that at the bottom line we need a higher power. We need God to turn things around. Peter was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus and one of the first leaders of the early Christian church. If there ever was a flip-flopper, it was Peter. One minute he was proclaiming that he would do anything for Jesus, and the next minute he was denying that he even knew Jesus. But in the end, Peter was ultimately used to be one of the leaders that got the church going. God definitely turned it around for Peter. I can remember times as a husband, a teacher, a parent, and now a pastor, where I have felt the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders like a ton of bricks. I needed then and I need today God to turn things around. In your important position as our city leaders, as our police force, as our fire department, I'm sure you felt this weight each and every day, time and time again. You want to do what you think is best, but others don't see it that way. Perhaps you're feeling the trauma and burnout from those 5 additional pandemics, that depression, that distrust, divisions, defamation, and disorientation. You know that deep down, only God can turn it around. Well, tonight I want to leave you with this Bible verse, written by someone who had a boatload of experience with God turning it around for him. Peter writes in the 5th chapter of his first letter, he writes, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Would you pray with me? Most gracious Father, we acknowledge this evening that you, only you, have the power to turn things around. Lord, I thank you for calling this group of honorable men and women to do their best to turn things around for our beloved city. They have done and are doing so much. Lord, would you encourage them in their work this evening? Lord, would you strengthen them as they strive to do what is best for the citizens of Watertown? May they sense your supernatural turning around power as they work for the good of all of us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Dave. All right. Just as a reminder before I officially start our meeting, if you do want to do any public comment, please just fill out the form in the hallway and then pass it to our clerk. So with that, I'm going to call to order our Tuesday, November 7th Common Council meeting. Megan, will you please take the roll?
Davis. Here. Lampy.
Virtual? Not yet.
Board. Here. Bartz. Blanky.
Here.
Smith. Here. Schmid.
Here.
Wetzel.
Here.
Moldenhauer.
Here.
Very good. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, the first item on our agenda is the minutes of the council meeting from October 17th. Any comments or questions on those minutes from anyone? All right, next is comments and suggestions from citizens present. Megan?
Ken Berg, 1201 Richards Ave.
Mayor McFarland, you have the public hearing tonight?
We do for the budget.
Should I wait till
Is
then?
it about the budget?
Yeah.
Yes, please do. Thank you. Anyone else that would like to comment not about the budget? All right. Well, with that, we do have a public hearing this evening for our 2024 budget proposal. If anyone would like to comment, you can come up to the microphone and state your name and address. Mr. Berg.
Good evening, Mayor McFarland and council members. I'm Ken Berg. I am at 1201 Richards Avenue in Watertown. And I've been following your budget where I can as far as the discussions you're having on next year's budget. And I did note and notice that in the finance minutes and other documents that you're referencing a 5.4% increase in your general fund expenditures for 2024 versus this year. And that type of an increase would typically result in a very large or quite a large type of tax increase for 24. But you have $1 million of new revenue sharing from the state that is meant to offset and to obviously help you with your budget discussions and make them more affordable for the taxpayers in Watertown. You also have earmarked $746,000 in your general fund that you're planning to use for operating expenses, in next year's budget, and to help that again be more affordable. But again, if you look at that $1 million, you look at that $746,000 of dollars revenues that you have this year, it makes the 1.72% levy increase misleading and distorted for the reasons I'm just pointing out here. In addition, when you look at your tax service, your debt service levy, and what you have allocated there, you're showing $586,000 of, again, fund balance money being transferred into that account to help make the debt service levy a smaller number, and it was 4.26 that you're proposing for next year. Again, that's a lower number, and it's lower because of funding it with fund balance. I was hoping, that these types of revenue sharing dollars from the state, and with using our fund balance the way you're proposing to do, that people in Watertown were going to get some property tax relief in their tax bills this year. That's what I was hoping for, because last year when we got our reassessment citywide of all properties that were residential, it ended up with a lot of people having increases in taxes in their bills last year, when they were hoping, because of the reassessment, they were going to get a decrease or a reduction. So it didn't happen. And they were hoping, a lot of people were hoping and are still hoping. I mean, this budget's not over yet. You're still going to have your discussion, and you're still going to look at these issues, hopefully, more before you actually take action. But I guess my overall point is there's things in that budget that I did see, and you want to have 15% increases in wages for police and fire. That's a big number, and I'm on board entirely on the need for having higher increases for both departments to catch up and make them better. But when you look at the $400,000 that you're also going to allocate for increases in your health care expenses, that your premiums for insurance, that $400,000, 14%, according to your finance director, that, along with the increases of 15% over 2 years, is a lot of money to allocate. And there could have been some adjustments through cuts in the budget, and or in some way looking at it in a way that would have reduced those types of impacts beyond what you've done. I'm asking you to relook at that. I'm asking you to be aware of the impact you're having because of the way you're funding these increases. It is making it look good when it's actually artificially, it's higher than it really is what I'm pointing out here. My last point is in looking at your minutes from the Finance Committee, you're showing that you're going to put $8,000 to actually do a study on that city administrator idea. I'm obviously against it. I have my reasons why, but I'm disappointed. It hasn't had good discussion. It's now gone to a Finance Committee apparently, and it looked like it was in the mayor's budget for $8,000. It was then made into an ARPA type of fund in order to make the allocation and to do it that way. But I don't see a person that made the motion or seconded that intent, and it's there. I'm asking your council to take that out of there because the idea is not warranted. Our city can do just fine with a strong mayor, with a good council, and with good department heads. We don't need to spend the $8,000. We don't need to make a radical change in our form of government. And that idea is we can use that $8,000 somewhere else in the budget. And I encourage you to please look at it more critically and know that there's a lot of people opposed to it. And I think it's a lot of reasons. It's had discussion before, and it was shot down. I was on the council when we discussed it, and it didn't have merit at that time. And I know where you struggle as a city in different ways, but we have ways of fixing the problem. We don't need to go do anything radical. You're going to take away the council's actions and make them less potent and more effective, and you're going to give the administrator, who's a non-elected person, the ability to make decisions beyond what they should. So it's a bad decision. Please see if you can make a decision to take it out of that budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. Anybody else that would like to comment during the public hearing for the budget? All right, we'll close the public hearing. The next item on our agenda is reports. You have the Benton Family Town Square Programming Commission minutes from August 21st, licensing from September 13th, Park Rec and Forestry from September 18th, Plan Commission from September 25th, licensing from September 27th, Plan Commission from October 2nd, Finance from October 3rd through 12th, Library Board of Trustees from October 12th, the RDA from October 18th, Public Works from October 24th, and Downtown Main Street Reconstruction Task Force from October 25th. Anybody have any comments or questions? Mr. Blanky.
I have several comments on the the Finance Committee minutes.
Great.
The first is the general government tax levy. It's going up by $60,000, and I want to commend the Finance Committee for doing a great job at that modest increase. I will say I think we missed a great opportunity. $60,000, we could have made it zero. And it's the one chance that we wouldn't have raised any taxes. And I think it would have been a really big win for the council and for everyone who lives in the city to finally see a zero increase in taxes. The other item and Mr. Berg actually spoke to it as well. It's 90, the ARPA funds, the $8,000 allocation for a study for an administrative structure, using ARPA, ARPA funds to do so. I think that spending the money on this study would be a complete waste of money. If you really want to give away $8,000, I'll take it and I'll tell you what that study is going to say right now. It's going to say that we should go to a city administrator form of government. It's going to say it should be a six-figure salary. And it should say that, what we'll do then is the people who are looking to push for that are going to use that study to sway public opinion, saying, see, we have this government study. Anytime government commissions a study, they get the answer that they want to sway public opinion, whether it's building a school, a new fire station, or a city administrator. This is another example of that, and I think it's a waste of $8,000, and I think it's simply going to be used to sway public opinion for this, and I think it should be taken out of the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Blanky. Anyone else has any comments or questions on the minutes? All right, then let's move to communications and recommendations. Chief, I'll invite you up. Our first item this evening is the presentation of a life-saving award to Officer Weiner. I think you have to come up, John.
We'll start with that, step one.
Yeah. And then Chief, you'll just have to turn that mic on.
I know you're loving this. So, if anybody knows anything about John, so this, I did turn it on.
Okay.
Yep. Knows that he hates every minute of this, being up here, being in the limelight, having any attention on him, having his picture taken, any of that. That is not John Weiner. I'm only getting one chance to do this because after tonight, I don't get the chance to talk about John. So I'm going to take 1 minute to talk about John just a little bit because he has history in this city. Born and raised Watertownian, but besides that, John's been with our department for 13 years, since 2010. But John's worked every shift in our department. He's been a member of our entry team. He's been a training officer. We use him still as a training officer, even though he really doesn't want to train much anymore. But we still use him in that capacity. And he just recently went to instructor school to become an instructor in our department as well. A little bit of history about John. So John's dad was a police officer here in the city of Watertown, so some of you may or may not know that. His dad is Dale Weiner. Dale passed away a few years ago. Dale worked for the city of Watertown from 1973 until 1998. Dale was probably one of the first people I met when I walked through the door of the Watertown Police Department, the old Watertown Police Department, and I can't really say this story like I could in private, but I walked in and Dale was swearing at the chief at that time, and that was the interaction I walked into, and I thought, what's going on here? What am I walking into? But that was Dale. Dale was just kind of a gruff guy, a good guy, and opposite of you. Quiet, soft-spoken. Never has. John and Dale, both Marines. Dale serving Vietnam. John did a couple of tours in the Iraq War. Like I said, one of the quietest, most soft-spoken people you will meet. You get one chance to take a picture of him, and then he's like a ghost. He's gone. Like, that's it. Get him in there. John's married to Lisa. He has 3 daughters. He's a dance dad. He would love to show you his dance moves at any time. He wears his dance dad shirts everywhere. So this is John's second life-saving award. He received his first one in 2013, I believe. This one I looked back, he received one. So I'll tell you just a little bit, because I got the chance to embarrass you now, so now I'll tell you about that incident. So on Thursday, September 20th, 2023, at around 10 a.m., Officer John Weiner was sent to a report of a female subject standing on the railroad bridge that goes over South Church Street. Officer Kathy Riedel, who's here as well, who put him in for this award, was dispatched to that call as well. Officer Weiner stopped his squad and approached a woman who was on the bridge from Montgomery Street, while Officer Riedel approached from Washington Street. As Officer Weiner approached, the female was sitting on the ground, and as he approached her, she stood up on the outside of the railing, John yelled at her to stop and began running towards her. Officer Weiner then noticed that the woman had secured a noose around her neck and had tied it off on the other side of the bridge. And at this point, she was on the outside railing, facing towards the tracks with her back to traffic. Officer Weiner slowed to a walk and extended his hands in a non-threatening gesture and continued slowly walking towards her. The woman then yelled, "You're not going to stop me." Officer Weiner still slowly approached her, arms out, and asked her to stop and just talk to him. At this point, the woman saw Officer Riedel approaching from the other side of the bridge and turned, so she now faced the road with her back to the and body to the bridge. The woman adjusted the rope, at which time was freed from underneath her arm. It was unobstructed. Officer Weiner kept talking and slowly approached her and just wanted to talk to her. "What's going on?" were some of the words said. The woman appeared to be readying herself to jump, looked down, and then straight ahead. Officer Weiner took a few quick steps, grabbed the woman's arms, and dropped his body weight down, essentially pinning her on the railing so that she couldn't jump. Eventually, she started hitting Officer Weiner and was yelling, "You're not going to stop me." Officer Weiner and Riedel were able to finally lift her back over the railing. And here's what Officer Riedel wrote about Officer Weiner. "Officer Weiner handled himself in this situation with care and speed that no doubt saved the life of a woman who was determined to die. I'm so proud to be part of this department, this shift, and have Officer Weiner as a coworker. Officer Weiner is most deserving of a life-saving award for his actions in this call, as I have no doubt at all the woman would have let go of the railing in a moment's time. Additionally, she thinks that you should be put in for Jefferson County Officer of the Year." So that'll come your way as well. At least you'll get the nomination. So with that, I get to present you with your second life-saving award. And number 10 as well for that. So thank you. John, do you want to take a picture with your family up here?
Family, do you guys want to come up?
Just walk real slow. Congratulations.
You know how much you love this. A couple of different ones.
That's why you're taking your time.
Yeah. She's the beacon of light.
She didn't bring it, though.
I
I told her
know.
she should have.
Captain Malloy said, no, that might be a little much tonight.
Oh, man. All right. The next item we have is the recognition of the retirement of Police Chief Kaminsky. I'm going to invite up Captain Brower and Assistant Chief Olson. There we go. And Chief, you as well.
All right, thank you all for coming tonight. You get to help us commemorate some really excellent work, some very competent work. 32 years as our police chief was Chief Robert Kaminsky with the Watertown Police Department. Just a real brief rundown of how he started here. He began back in 1991. So that makes me still in high school at that time, makes me feel good about it. In 1998, he became a field training officer. 2002, promoted to sergeant, both patrol and detective division. 2009, promoted to captain, patrol division. In 2018, then, he became our police chief and has served very admirably over the past 5 years, leading our department through a lot of things. As chief, I watched him rise to the occasion in so many situations, so many difficult, dangerous, frustrating things that officers endure on a daily basis. But especially at the leader of the helm, he gets a very unique and specific role in that, different stresses, things that are quite difficult. And I watched him as he worked through those things, actually use them to motivate himself to become a better person, a better leader. Was very impressive for me and something for me to emulate. In fact, we rarely deal in law enforcement in Watertown with that most difficult thing, the officer-involved shooting. In fact, we haven't had one for many years, probably as far as back as we can remember, sort of thing. But over the past 3 years, we've actually had 3 of them, and he was the one leading our department when those things happened. So I personally watched him. I was a new captain at the first one, watched him deal with the situation he'd never dealt with before that was quite complicated and difficult. He rose to the occasion in an impressive way, a way that I did not even in myself find a way to make that make sense to me. It was just something to watch and to really be proud of, very much emulate. Chief Kaminsky, you excellently led in those critical moments. I want to thank you for being there in those really tough times. That kind of legacy that you've created for our department, someone to follow, is not going to be quickly forgotten here in Watertown. So, with that, we wish you well. Thank you so much for being our chief. Have a good time moving into that glorious sunset of retirement that we all look forward to someday. Hope that works out. Thank you, Chief.
So I don't very often give the same speech twice in a day. So for those of you that already heard it, you still have to laugh along with the jokes that I have written. So obviously, I'm so thankful to be able to be with you all this evening, to be able to honor Chief Kaminsky and all that he's given to our police department and to our community. I said this afternoon I would have loved for Chief Kaminsky to stay for many, many more years, but obviously we're happy for him and are just really full of gratitude for everything that he has given to our community and that he has given his entire career to our community. Chief Kaminsky began with the PD, as Captain Brower said, in 1991, and when all is said and done, that's over 32 years. And I think that's something to really let sink in, because it's not very often nowadays that people stick around anywhere for like 10 years, let alone 15 years, let alone over 32. And not only did Chief Kaminsky stick around, but he really gave a lot to this community, and he grew with us, and he worked to build and be a part of a police department that is in a cadre of all of its own throughout the state. When Chief became Chief in October of 2018, I didn't realize until I was starting to prepare for this evening that he was Chief for just 6 months before I came. I don't think I ever noticed that, because I never noticed any newness in him. He always operated as a seasoned and experienced chief from the day I started working with him. His confidence and stability are something I found a lot of trust and a lot of comfortability in, and I know that his colleagues inside of the PD and outside of the department as well found a lot of trust and comfortability as well. During my time here, Chief Kaminsky has been one of the key pillars of our leadership team, whether it be the institutional knowledge that I know he has, or the years of experience he had, or perhaps it's just the standing a chief like him garners. Chief Kaminsky was looked to in a variety of ways beyond just being our chief of police. I said this afternoon, and I'll say it again, he was our unofficial IT person in more ways than I realized. I mean, offboarding him was not easy. We had like network permissions and a variety of things that he had access to and helped us with along the way when the city didn't have IT. We didn't have an IT coordinator until about 3 years ago. So he served tremendously in that way. He was always our do you remember when person to provide us that knowledge that you just can't replicate. And he was always the person that we went to when something was just unconventional or we couldn't quite understand how to move forward. And while I know Chief Kaminsky was a great officer, sergeant, and captain, I know from my experience that he was an incredible chief, an incredible team member to our leadership team. And when the going got tough, and it got tough for us plenty of times, he was a very steady and poised leader. I've heard that from more police officers today than I can count, and leading up to today as well. When he called me in the middle of the night to share that we had our first officer-involved shooting in decades, I never wondered for a second if our PD did the right thing, and I never wondered for a second if Chief Kaminsky knew the next step to take. We had plane crashes, fatal house fires, standoffs, murder-suicides, challenging public events, train accidents, COVID, and I, unfortunately, could keep going on and on with that list. But in each and every one of those circumstances, I had the faith and the confidence in our ability as a department to respond and to perform at a very high level. I don't take that assurance for granted. I know there are definitely very difficult situations like these that don't go well for the police or for the community. But I knew when the going got tough, people would be people, wrong choices could be made, but I knew that more often than not, because I observed it myself, that our PD would make the right choice. That expectation of excellence came from the top down. It's one that the chief cultivated, and our community is sincerely better for it. As I said this afternoon, it's been a wild one in so many ways, but it really has been great. I really do believe that. I've appreciated very much your insight, your expertise, and your willingness to go beyond your role as chief when our community needed it. And you did it without hesitation, and when you were called on, you answered, regardless of the circumstance, and I think that's incredibly admirable. It's been an incredible blessing to us, and I hope you take tremendous pride in a career that most people only dream of having. So on behalf of our community, thank you very much for your time, your dedication, your leadership, and the care that you've given to this community.
I'm going to repeat a lot of what was already said, but Chief Kaminsky's 32 years of dedicated service to the Watertown community is truly impressive. I want to take this moment to thank him for his strong leadership. The role of chief requires many skill sets. He has done a commendable job maintaining the department, along with everything it entails. Chief Kaminsky has been involved in many critical incidents during his tenure. I think it's important to mention being chief during COVID. I am sure while he applied for chief, he played scenarios through his mind for how he would handle them, but could never prepare for these unexpected moments. I personally witnessed his commitment during these difficult times. To me, this is the ideal leader, someone who doesn't show weakness. He dealt with challenges as they were presented and served as the face of calm, that no matter what difficulties we faced, we would persevere. We have a department of dedicated professionals who viewed Chief Kaminsky's strengths and worked together to maintain order in our city. For that, we should also be proud of what we do and what we can achieve. What stands out to me the most is Chief Kaminsky's support for all employees of the department. His everyday goal was to make sure all had what we needed to effectively do our jobs. Law enforcement is becoming more and more technology-based. We all can relate that the more technology that is added, the more that can go wrong. We have our dedicated IT, but their resources can only be so stretched and so thin. Chief Kaminsky dived in and became the department's informal IT. He took the time to self-teach himself and took pride in being able to solve issues quickly to maintain the department's efficiency. This is just one example of many where Chief Kaminsky has taken on not only his leadership role, but then some to maintain the department. Chief, thank you for everything you have done for our department. You have served as a strong leader. I wish you nothing but the best during your retirement.
So I'll turn this over to Chief in a moment, but on behalf of the Common Council, this is in recognition of your 32 years of service to this community and its citizens. And we always have this quote on here, and it says, "There's no greater challenge and there's no greater honor than to be in public service." And I think that's incredibly fitting of your time here. So I'll hand this to you and say a few words.
Thank you. All right, it's really been a long, emotionally draining kind of day. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to the officers who came tonight, everybody here as well. I've had a great career, 32 years, a little over. I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. I really don't. I'm up at...
We're excited you're bringing us donuts.
Yeah, up at 4 every day, so apparently I need to get donuts and do things like that. But I've had a great career, but it's not, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, it's not just me. It's all the people who work for our department. They make it what it is. They do all the hard work. Sometimes I get a little bit of credit for that. And they really care about this community. They care about the job that they do. And you're lucky that you have all of them here in our city. So I'm very proud of the work that they do. And I'm not going away. I will be here. So you got to protect me now too. So thank you very much.
Sir, of all the officers in this room, does anyone want to come sit up here? Awesome. Thank you, Captain Brower. All right. But don't they know we're going to debate the budget tonight? I mean, what the heck? But we're debating that. No, I'm just kidding. All right. All right. We've got people generally moved out. So let's move on to new business. The first item for you all is the committee appointments. Is there a motion on those appointments? Mr. Butzel? Motion by Wetzel. Is there a second to that? Second by Mr. Board. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. We have a couple of items this evening. The first is the discussion and possible action regarding our city budget. So I just want to set the table a little bit. So we have obviously the budget public hearing this evening. We have this opportunity for any questions, comments. We've already heard a couple of comments. We can continue to discuss those if you'd like. We can take in any motions if people would want to make them. We will ultimately vote on the passage of the budget on November 21st. So that we'll have this discussion one more time, and it'll happen at that meeting. But if there's anything in particular that people would like to question or comment around, or any information that you'd like from the finance director, now would be a good opportunity. So we don't get many opportunities like this at these meetings for kind of open discussion. So I will open it for any comments or questions that people may have. Mr. Smith.
I'd like to follow up on some of the comments that were previously made, both when the Finance Committee minutes were discussed and when the comments from citizens were made. I'm very concerned about the serious consideration that apparently is being given by some to dramatically changing our form of city government. Specifically, within the budget, there is the $8,000 that is to fund a study. Alderman Blanky made comments relating to a common perception about what committees of this sort are pretty much guaranteed to do. And I want to state from the outset, I am not in favor of changing our form of government. Our mayor-council form of government has served us extremely well, with a minor period of exception when a different form was used. But nevertheless, over the course of our community history, it has been a system of government that has served us well. And what I would like to do is to ask a couple of questions, because I haven't seen this particular approach taken commonly in the budget process. According to the Finance Committee minutes, the appropriation of the $8,000 is specifically in the budget. But at the same time, it is mentioned that the source of funding for that budget allocation is ARPA money. And I'm wondering, what is the reason for that distinction? Why is it not just a recommended portion of the budget, as the vast majority of other items is identified in the budget? Perhaps, I know Alderman Bartsch was the committee chairman during the Finance Committee hearing, but possibly some other member of the Finance Committee or somebody that knows the answer to that would indicate, why are we even referring to the unique source of funding for this one particular line item?
So my recollection is that it's being allocated using ARPA funds, because there was an agreement by the majority of the Finance Committee that it would be a worthy study, and that's where the funds were available, was in the ARPA fund, and so that's why it's being allocated there.
Mark, did you have anything?
Fund.
Excuse me?
It looked like Mark was going to say something at one point, too.
Unless a finance person was going to answer the question. Obviously, Mr. Bartz is not here for it now. It was the reality of it being a non-recurring expense kind of prompted it to be something that is ARPA related versus something that would be general operations. And also, just to move it over to there.
Well, just from a practical point of view, I have a question. Assume, arguendo, that there is a effort to remove this specific line item from the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Is the fact that it was designated as ARPA money something that gives an independent basis, regardless of the fact that it might be removed from the budget, for it to return under some notion of ARPA funding that could then somehow proceed, notwithstanding the fact that it was dropped from the budget?
No.
No, if this is removed from the budget, the ARPA fund remains as is. This doesn't then show up somewhere else.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure of that. In light of that, I would like to make a motion that the $8,000 designated for a study of the administrative approach for governing the city be removed from the budget.
Motion by Mr. Smith.
Second.
It's all at once. I saw Mr. Moldenhauer first. Is there any discussion on that? Ms. Davis.
So we've never spoken about the letter that we received from so many business owners. And when we received that letter that very night, I'm like, I need to learn more about this. Did a considerable amount of research. I have a spreadsheet that I stayed up way too late that night trying to wrap my mind around this. It's my understanding that in Wisconsin, cities are organized under different chapters, and that one of the ways to organize a city is mayor, council, and please jump in and correct me if I get this wrong. One of the ways is as we're organized, mayor, council, but another way is manager, council, so city manager, council. And I learned that night as I was researching that what some cities do is they're still organized as a mayor-council form under, I think it's Chapter 62, but they decide to hire a city administrator to take care of the day-to-day dealings. And they do it differently. Some cities keep the mayor full-time, and they hire a city administrator. And ultimately, though, the mayor still, I think, according to the statute and chapter, has the oversight over everything. So many cities, though, drop the mayor down to part-time, and they hire a city administrator, and the city administrator does the day-to-day kinds of oversight. So it was interesting to me just to even learn about the fact that it's not necessarily technically another form of government, because you're still organized under your original chapter, but what you're doing is hiring a city administrator to run the day-to-day. Now, that's one way to do that, and I don't know what the intent of this letter was, and I don't know that they did, the people who wrote it. Maybe they were suggesting that this should be a totally different form of government with the manager council. So as I looked into it, something I learned is that for those cities that are organized like we are, city and council, would you know that over 50% of the cities in Wisconsin actually do have a city administrator helping out in some degree? Well, that was interesting to me, because then if you recognize that, then it's not necessarily intellectually honest to say that it doesn't work or that you shouldn't necessarily have it, because it obviously works out for those communities and they like it. Something else I learned, though, is that people don't like change, and that all across America, people are flip-flopping. They'll come up with changes. They want to go from the mayor to a manager, and so they'll put it out for referendum, and then they'll put it on the ballot. Lo and behold, those rarely pass. People kind of like what they have. So that was, some of my thought processes. So going into this, when we were looking at the allocation of $8,000 for ARPA, The idea there was, well, this is a study, and it's good to look into it, because if 50% of the communities that are organized like we are have decided that the complexity of running a city is so difficult that they would like to take on a city administrator to help with that, well, that's valid to look into. But I also need to say that there's another side of this for me. Having just gone through, this is the second time I've gone through the budget, and like you, Mr. Blanky, wanted it at zero. And we worked really, really, really hard to try to get it to zero. It was a goal for all of us. And in it, we had to cut and scrounge and try to come up even to get a 3/4 position then for this year for one of our departments. So what I'm going to with this is, although I don't see anything wrong with exploring an option that might be good for our city, practically speaking, when it's all said and done, I can't see how it would ever be possible to afford adding a city administrator. Let me explain why. A city administrator, Mr. Cheeseborough, would have to be the highest paid person, correct? I don't want to put you on the spot, so if you're not prepared to answer that. I was under the impression that that person would outrank everyone, and so we have things in our policy that say they have to be paid more than the person
Like compression, she's speaking to compression.
Yes.
The compression policy itself wouldn't necessarily mandate that.
So the city administrator would not necessarily have to be the highest paid person?
No, it would be dependent upon what a market rate for that position would be.
So I think where she's going, if there's subordinates, it would, I think the answer would be, it would depend upon the reporting relationships. Right? I mean, if you think about, like, let's talk about the chief of police. We just hired one.
Yep.
And we have a union contract. That all goes, compression goes uphill potentially. I think that's where she's
Yes,
going.
that's what I'm
The
saying.
way that the city's been implementing the compression policy and stuff, that could be done depending on the relationship between the city administrator and the various other department heads. But no, that's not a guaranteed requirement or outcome. That's something that this council would have to decide when the time came as to what an appropriate market rate was for that position. There's a lot of factors that are built into that compression policy that would allow the council to say, for this reason, we're setting the salary at this, even if they have subordinates that report to them that are paid a different amount.
Okay, that's helpful. So, but another thought process I had is actually on my spreadsheet, I charted, well, let me go back to the letter. The letter suggested that this would give stability. But when you actually look at it, while there are some city administrators who have stayed and planted roots and raised their families, what very often happens, and you can trace it, is there's a movement up. So starting at one level and then staying there 2, 3, 4 years, and then they got a job somewhere else, and then they got a job somewhere else, each time getting a step up. So I'm not certain that the stability argument is necessarily a guarantee as well. And then I'm also just concerned that, one other factor, I don't want to put you on the spot. Would there be any requirement for a city administrator would we be able to require a city administrator to live in the city of Watertown?
No.
Right. So that then goes to the stability factor too. So we could, go this direction, but the amount of money probably that Watertown could be able to afford would probably be a stepping stone. And the fact that you cannot require a city administrator to live in the city, that's a problem too. So I present all this to say, I supported this as it was in there because I don't think there's anything wrong with considering how we can improve, how we can do things better, and sometimes that requires some study. But I would also support, if as there has been a motion, taking it out, because as I look at the likelihood of that $8,000 actually resulting in anything that could be even feasible, it's very unlikely. And so I think that's what I wanted to share with you.
Other comments? Mr. Schmidt?
I just have a technical question, and Mark, you can answer this one maybe. Pending this moving forward, based on the current motion on the floor, Alderman Blanky mentioned that there's a $60K increase. Is it feasible to take this $8K, if it passes, from that $60K to reduce the overall increase to make it less, or am I misunderstanding in that context?
That is a misunderstanding.
Okay.
The ARPA fund is not part of the tax levy. So consider the tax levy, the 60,000 is Fund 1. ARPA is Fund 24. So it doesn't connect the dots to that 60,000.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, just a couple of other procedural questions. First of all, regardless how this would be funded, assuming it remained in the budget, would it not be like every other appropriated line item, which at the point of identified planned expenditure, it would have to come before the council in a resolution format for it to be funded? In other words, the fact that it's in the
Yes.
budget is
Yes.
just the means of paying. But because basically, we don't know anything about what this study is all about, it seems to me that there are a whole host of issues that need to be debated if it were to remain in the budget. And what you're saying is, yes, a resolution would be required, and that could be tailored according to what the collective council believes is the best way forward.
I want to be careful with my yes. So I was saying yes because I thought what you were asking is, would that position have to be funded? That was a yes. If it's an $8,000 contract, that's below a department head level approval. So no, we would not need a resolution for the contract, if that's what you're asking.
The contract, in other words, for moving forward in the course of implementing the identified funding need, before it is actually funded, is there going to be a resolution by which the parameters of the study can be discussed, modified in the resolution, so that what we end up getting studied is what we actually want to have studied?
So I would say I don't think a resolution would be required, but if it would stay in, I'm certainly open to having discussion at a committee or council level on what people would like included in like an RFP essentially, right? Like I think that's what you're asking is there an opportunity for input into what we would be requesting for services? We certainly can.
I'll just throw out one issue that I think is particularly relevant. On a regular basis, the council considers pay raises for future councils and pay raises for future mayors. But those who vote for it are not eligible to receive it until the point where they're reelected. That's why it's done in advance. To extend that analogy, what I am interested in is if this were to move forward, and again, I'm not in favor of it in the first instance, and I'm going to vote to remove it from the budget, but what I want to make sure is that there would be an opportunity for our council to discuss and specifically address the issue of, is any elected official who is involved in the ultimate passing of this dramatic change eligible to become the city administrator? And I am taking the position that they should automatically be precluded from taking the position because of an inherent conflict of interest in promoting the position and then benefiting from it in the course of their position of elected office at this point. Those are the kinds of things I want to make sure are available so that we can have that understanding before any study goes forward. And lastly, what I want to make sure is that, assuming there's a recommendation from this committee favorable to this dramatic change in government form, is a referendum required for it to be ultimately added to our code? In other words, is it a charter amendment to the code? Is it a charter ordinance change that would require a referendum?
Stephen?
I do believe a referendum would be required for the ordinance change.
Excuse me?
I do believe a referendum would be required for an ordinance change. In terms of any elected official being eligible for the position, I am somewhat aware of some case law and some authority that we would have to look into to make a determination that may already be decided by statute or other opinions. And so I would provide an opinion about that as we progressed, but it's not something I've spent time researching on, because until this council has given us instructions to investigate it or look into it more, it's not something that I've prioritized.
Ms. Davis?
It's my understanding if you stay organized as city council and you just want to hire a city administrator, from what I read, it could be either ordinance or referendum, whatever the council were to decide, however they would approach it. That's for that. Now, as far as the manager council, I'm sure that's way more complicated.
Mr. Schmidt?
Mark, you mentioned it's Fund 24. Is that correct? Do I understand it? Pending this moving forward and the 8,000 being removed, what would that be able to be used for then? Since it looks like it's a non-recurring grant fund, if I understand it correctly. according to
That
those.
is correct. So it could be used for anything. Just as a reminder to all of council, we are subject to the United States to allocate 100% of ARPA funds by the end of 2024 and spend them all by 2026. But it's open wide as to what ARPA funds could effectively be used for in this stead.
Mr. Molnar, did you have your hand up before? Oh, maybe I'm, no? Yes, did you? Okay. Did you have your hand up before? Okay, please go ahead.
I personally, I think we have a good form of government the way it is right now. And I think the people of Watertown, the people I have talked to, they think so too. And I could not vote for a change of government.
So right now we have a motion and a second to remove the study from the ARPA budget. Does anyone else have comments just on that piece? Mr. Lampy?
Sorry I'm late. I do want to speak in favor of this particular entry in the use of the ARPA budget. And one of the things that this particular study would do, and that I very much am open to Alderman Smith's suggestion that there is significant council input into the thing. I think that any study coming back without that would essentially be dead on arrival. I very much do want to understand what that looks like for a city the size of Watertown. We are, in some cases, getting to be a bit of an outlier in terms of the form of government that we have, the size of the community that we have, and basically those, all the various complex pieces that are moving around with an organization this size. In particular, I've been very impressed with where the city is headed in the last number of years in a number of areas, including risk management in particular. We've seen some reorganization in the way that we essentially handle and budget into the future, and I'd like to essentially build on that and understand if the administrator or manager or something is part of that process. But I do agree with Alderman Smith that if we are going to undertake a study, that basically has to be done under the direction of the council. Otherwise, the value we're going to get out of it is going to be very small.
Anyone else? Megan?
Davis? We'll have Smith.
Do you want to rephrase? So it's a motion to remove. Mr. Smith?
On the motion to remove, I vote yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Wetzel?
Yes.
Moldenhauer?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Ford?
No. You skipped.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lampy? No. Motion passed.
You forgot Mr. Blanky.
Sorry.
Yes.
Blanky.
Let's start this one over.
Okay. We'll do Smith?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm
Oh.
totally kidding. You have everybody.
Okay.
I had a no, or a remove, 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 do not remove, do not remove, remove.
So motion passed 7-2.
Thank you, Meg. All right, so that is removed from,
7-1.
oh, I didn't even.
6 to 2.
6-2.
6-2. Sorry, guys.
It's because Jonathan walked in the 11th hour and screwed up her
I
cadence.
still only count as one vote.
Okay, so that is removed from the ARPA budget, or the reoccurring fund is what we actually call it. Other comments, questions, thoughts on the budget? Mr. Schmidt?
Just a question. So the IT has an increase of 60,000. Is that going to be an annual increase as a recurring expense, or is this a one-time license agreement for the Office 365?
This will be a recurring expense from this point forward. We had a number of issues of security that we needed to shore up. And in that multi-factor authentication, we needed to go to a different platform on the Microsoft 365. So this is an increase, and it will continue to be the higher number going forward.
That item in particular was one of the 4 items that led to not being able to keep it at 0.
Again, I'm not saying that I'm unhappy. I mean, well, and I have the number here.
1.7.
I was like, I think I did
10
submit a budget
10
at 0
million.
increase,
You did.
and
10
I
million,
begged them.
yeah.
I said, come on, I actually submitted one for the first time in as long as we can tell that had no increase to the general fund levy, but
Like I
they
said,
worked hard.
In baseball terms, this is a triple.
Yeah.
We're $60,000 away from a home run.
Hey, we're rounding third.
10,460,000.
We're hard rounding third. But we got called back.
Very close.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Schmidt?
I just, I might be missing it in here, line item. Is the fire station numbers in here, or am I missing that, or is that a separate item?
So I'll ask Mr. Stevens to speak to that. Right now, the fire station is in at an amount that will not construct the station. But Mr. Stevens has prepared a memo for you all that I believe he sent to you. So Mr. Stevens, can you set the table a little bit on that one?
Yes, I'm trying to find my page number, first of all, so that you would know where it is. It's not in the general fund.
It's in 5.
It's in Fund 5, page 59, if you happen to be looking at the budget. What is in the budget as part of capital projects is a revenue of $12,500,000, which was the resolution that was passed by you a few months ago as we were looking towards, do we move forward with the fire station project or not? That was our first step, feeling that without that permission granted, we obviously could not invest any time or effort, and we could not pay for an architectural design if we did not have the permission to move forward with a fire station. So that number, that's where that 12.5 came from at that point of time. Five Bugles was the primary influencer of some of those projections. Five Bugles is not the company that was hired as the architect, but that is where that 12.5 started.
So my question is, based on some of the things that were, the increase in construction costs based on some of the estimates we received from some of the bids and from some redesign, I had a good conversation with Chief Test this week on some of the concerns and that I think we need to revisit what we're wanting to approve with that and what we don't, so we can look and see if that number is going to change based on some of that conversation, so we can get a more accurate number, so we have a better idea of what to potentially increase that to account for some of those unforeseen costs in regards to construction materials that are outside of our scope and control.
We do have our architect and construction manager on remotely as well. Were you raising your hand?
So I had some notes on this item as well. So I have to say I'm frustrated We haven't put a shovel in the ground yet, and we're 1.3 million over budget without a shovel in the ground. That's not even, we haven't even found out any of the hiccups, and they always happen. Something's going to happen, we're gonna find out, we're gonna have a change order, it will happen. I'm just wondering if the scope of this project at this dollar amount is realistic at this point. I think that we can get all of the things we need in this station in a simplified design and in a slightly smaller footprint. And I think that we need to revisit this, because being over budget before you've even moved a grain of sand, and not being over budget by a small amount, 1.3 million. That's what the shortfall on this document says, 1.3 million, before we've even started the project. I can't see how this is feasible at this point. I'm not saying we don't need the fire station. We've all taken the tour. The biggest thing I think we need the improvements on are the employee health and welfare items. You know, the hazmat showers and those types of things, when they come back, I agree we need those things. But it's just really difficult to swallow this scope of a project being over budget before you even start.
Mark, can you, I can't find it on here. What is the contingency that's built in right now?
Contingency on the, as part of the memo that I presented to you all Saturday, has approximately $990,000. In addition to that, we do know that the ground soil borings that we've received are not good. And so there is an allowance of approximately $370,000 that is in addition to that 990. So those numbers are in the total of the $15,360,000 that is listed on that memo.
When you say the soil borings aren't good, can you send that report out? I may already have it, but can I get another copy of that? Because I'd like to know what we're seeing in these soil borings. Where are we putting a building on a site that isn't suited for this type of building?
So Tony or Trevor, are either of you able to speak to that?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there's a soil boring report out there. Took various borings throughout that site and came back. And between the civil engineer and Trevor and our officers also on the line, they came up with a initial preliminary plan of how much of those soils would need to be likely replaced to make this a site that you could build on for the building and for some of the pavement areas. So I think, I can't remember what the average is, but it was up to several feet in some areas. So we took a guess, I guess, at this point in time, a guesstimate of how much that would need to be, and it came out to, I believe.
It came out to approximately 18,000 cubic yards of fill.
And that's that 377,000 that Mark had mentioned before. So that is built into the budget. That's an impact of this site that may or may not be something you'd have to spend on other sites, depending on what those reports came back. I mean, each site obviously is unique.
Do you have the
when
soil?
were those taken?
The soil report we just got maybe a month and a half ago, maybe?
So
Probably.
why weren't those done before the architect started? Why did we wait that long?
It was probably in March when the first the core samples were drilled, and we were waiting from March until about a month ago to get the results on what that said.
Took 6 months to get reports?
Yeah.
We pressed, so that contract was through our contractor, correct, Chief?
Correct.
And we pressed very many times to get the results of that report. I just want to level set. Factually speaking, we needed a location within a certain circumference at a certain size acreage. So there's not many of those that are the appropriate size acreage and the appropriate response radius that we knew, is this site perfect? Perfect would be not having to move a bunch of dirt. But it is suitable for building with these adjustments, I think, to answer the question. Can we get you the report? Yes. I don't know that I have it, but I know either you have it or Anthony or Trevor has it. Do you have it?
I probably have it. I
was
don't know
like-
how to read it, but I
Yeah.
can make sure that you get a copy if you need to. And then if I may,
Yeah.
can I add a little
Sure.
bit into there? Right, we're limited by where we could put it for response times, the acreage that we could get all the space we need. And it was programmed out. It's designed to be so big to fit our equipment. There is computer models that take the size of your fire engine, the size of your ambulance, how many of those that you have, and says you need X amount of square foot in your apparatus bay. How many employees are you going to have there? You need X amount of showers. You need X amount of living square feet for these, excuse me, for these employees. So that is how we came up to the size of the station that we have. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. It wasn't like we just dreamed up it should be this big, and that's what it is.
Mr. Molnar?
Just looking at the situation, there are soils sometimes that are not suitable to build on. And I'm just wondering about, is there any kind of contamination there at all, anywhere? Contamination can cost a fortune.
Yep. As far as I know and was told, it's not about contaminated soils, it's about compression ratios, so they have to dig out some of those, what they were calling non-suitable soils, and pack them down with
Okay.
crushed gravel.
Yeah, I'm not going to venture too far past, yeah. I know that we can crush it in our quarry. Yeah.
I guess a lot of it is summarized in the memo that everybody received, but we had a fairly extensive discussion on this at Finance not too long ago. One of the things that stood out to, I think, everybody who was present at the Finance meeting was this piece about the 45% inflation rate that has essentially afflicted the construction industry. And as bad as inflation has been for the rest of the economy, it hasn't been 45%. That has just been a giant kick in the pants across any of the building projects that we've been involved in. I think we may see that again shortly and some other things we're looking at. But the 45% was particularly significant to those people sitting on Finance, and they did share some of the concern that Alderman Blanky had with regard to other unknowns. And so you just heard, for example, that 8%, 900,000 or so in the contingency. One of the things that we were considering as a Finance Council was basically, essentially, is there another amount that we should consider on top of that? And that was when we got very specific in terms of what we felt comfortable borrowing around. And we didn't come out of Finance with a particular dollar recommendation, but if I'm characterizing it accurately, I think everybody on Finance was looking at raising the borrowing amount either to 13.5 or to 14. And with the 14 in particular, more or less almost gives us like a 12% contingency instead of the 8% to take advantage of, or basically just in case there's a few of those other things that we did not anticipate. In terms of the features that are going into the fire station, the biggest one that we coalesced around was the training facility. We are looking at this particular location because it supports that training facility. It allows us to essentially have a fire campus to basically keep all of our EMTs, firefighters current. It allows them to provide, all the service that we need for, all the seniors, all the population we have in this area to support all the other communities. It's basically one of the essential elements of that entire campus that we thought we needed to be able to fund in the resolution. So now that we have a construction manager, and this was part of the design of essentially going to architect first, basically understand what it costs, working through the construction manager, we're at what, 60%? 60%? 60% complete, and so that means we have, facts on the ground. We have some ideas of what things cost. We have an idea of what contractors are actually bidding at this particular time. So with those facts in hand, we can finally evaluate, is 12.5 good enough? We found that 12.5 is not good enough. And again, to characterize where we were as a Finance Council, we were pretty much around, the design is solid, we need some more money. Is it going to be an extra million, or is it going to be $1.5 million? we're a little bit split on that, but I think that, within the consensus of the finance anyway, we basically said this is a good use of the money. We're probably not going to be able to buy anything better or get a better price for these particular features, but we should move forward with the project.
I'm wondering if, Mark, they didn't receive the financing summaries, correct? In your memo? I know the Finance Committee packet had them.
Correct. This memo does not have all of that level of detail on it. What I asked Baird, our consultant, to do is provide a number of different financing options, 2 different approaches. One of them was to take into consideration our mill rate and to keep it at that same mill rate as much as possible. And in so doing, with that approach, what we're able to do because of our reval of last year, and I'll come back to that, is effectively start paying down the principal and obviously debt right away. It is a schedule of 20 years, but we could, by paying the principal down right away, save some in the ultimate difference in the different approach. The second approach is to take into consideration what the reval has done for us, and that is that mill rate of borrowing would actually be able to drop a considerable amount. Instead of something in the $2.55 range, $2.22 range, because of the capability of modifying the schedule of what gets paid when. The principal pay downs would be postponed a couple of years, as is sometimes the case with Baird, suggesting alternate to try to keep a balance approach on how much we pay down on an annual basis. So it sounds crazy, but we could borrow this sum of money, regardless of whatever it is, 13.5 or 14, and lower our mill rate by modifying what the payment schedule is.
The debt mill rate.
Yes, the debt mill rate, not the general fund mill rate and all. The capability that we have is in front of us with, if you will, a year's decision down the road. And let me just make sure that we understand that this is not the same as our annual borrowing that we do, in that this is a 1-year borrow, if you will, call it a construction loan. That during this 1-year period of time, we have the capability of asking for a sum of money through an instrument called a note anticipation note. That's the formal term for it, which allows us to borrow X dollars and allow us then to determine what that right price is in the course of the actual construction bidding through the use of add alternates, which give us the opportunity to say it's not in the required construction, but we want the pricing for this and this and this add-on, things that are not a part of the have to. Storage building, as an example, training facility would be another example. Some of the doors that were originally put in the front of the building because they have a quick release and have the ability for trucks to roll within a 10-second period of time. Some of those things are really nice, but are they, when it comes to the total cost, an absolute necessity? Those are things that can be decided upon once the actual bidding process takes place, and we have those things in front of Finance Committee to be able to say thumbs up, thumbs down, yes, let's include that, or no, let's not include that. So the ability to borrow a $14 million amount versus the $13.5 million is not a 20-year commitment. It's a 1-year commitment. That the future year is when we then lay out the 20 years, what the scheduling is of that 20 years, how much total it is. So if you were to suggest a $14 million borrow, and the decisions that finance makes in this project equal an amount less than $14 million, we have the capability of returning the difference. Almost a crazy thing that's happening in the world we live in, though, is that in the meantime, I'm going to be earning, hopefully, 4.5% to 5% interest on a sum of money that has been borrowed and sitting in our coffers waiting for it to be spent. I don't anticipate, in Fund 5, I represented a number of 65% completion by the end of 2024. This is a project that extends into 25, and so we'll be sitting on millions of dollars earning interest in the meantime, because we're only spending the bills that come in, obviously, after the fact. In using that approach with Brad, our consultant, he's actually surprised, if you will, that perhaps that there's a question on the difference between 13.5 and 14 million, in that we'd actually probably be making some money on that period of construction because of the interest rate market we just happen to find ourselves in now. Obviously, that's probably heading south through projections, but again, I would surmise that we're earning 5% right now on money sitting in accounts. Even if it's at 4%, and that's what my numbers represent, is a 4% assumption on earnings, a very conservative number, I felt, in the total value of these things.
I think you touched on it a bit, but when we committed to that first dollar value to get us going, it would be a penny per $1,000 of value for up to 7 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Originally, this 12.5 million.
And so now at 13.5 or 14 million, we are at the penny for 2 years or 3 years because of the reval.
That is correct.
So I think when you think about impact to the taxpayer, we were poising them, if you will, at 7 years, and we're dialing that back to 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
Sir.
and with that said, part of that plus penny for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years can be modified rather easily by the principal payment schedule of our regular $3.15 million that we're also looking to borrow for regular capital improvement projects. So that's also on the table. Part of why there are efficiencies, I'll put it that way, in spending or requesting both our requested $3.1 million for capital improvements and this sum of money for the fire project at the same time, because the process requires us, for instance, to go to Moody's for a bond rating. That costs us money. It's not a free conversation. So if we do these timing together, those financing costs are shared between both projects, and it wouldn't be double the cost for some of those things. So that hopefully answers the question as to why is it, if you will, a rush to do the financing beforehand. Well, in the course of 2024, we need to start spending some of that capital improvements. I can't wait until June to postpone, if you will, all of the financing, because a good portion of that is road construction, which obviously starts before June. So there are, of necessity, reasons why the borrowing takes place usually at the beginning of the year. Tradition has it that we have that funding in hand on the 1st of March, typically. And so that's why the financing piece of this is coming ahead of the actual bidding process that will take probably into March, April before that's done.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes.
I have buku questions.
Okay.
So I heard what Mr. Lampy said, the 45% increase. I might agree that it's been 45% since 2022 or 2021. It
2019.
definitely,
2019.
it has not gone up 45% in 2023. So again, I don't know what anybody was told back in March when we hired an architect, what we told him the budget was. When I practiced, when I was in a firm, if we were given a budget, we designed a building to that budget. Price hasn't gone up 45% in the last 8-9 months. I have zero confidence that we can get to a real number before the things are actually bid. And my experience has been, if you give me X, I'm going to figure out how to spend it. So my fear is if we go to 13.5 or 14 or 14.5 or 15, pick a number, that's what the building's going to cost. And I just don't know when somebody's going to say enough's enough. Until we get a firm number, we're not going anywhere. I bid a project, $325 million off of schematics and delivered it for that price. I cannot imagine why we can't get to a real number.
So you're suggesting we go out for bid with 60% design?
Well, let me ask you who's...
No, I want to clarify. Is that what
I
you're...
want to ask a question. Who's accountable to the number?
I told them, and the fire department can attest to this, I said the number is 12.5 over and over and over.
And we're not there.
We value engineered, we cut. Alder Davis asked at finance, what happened? And I think SEH replied, well, I can build you this is not my answer, this was theirs. We can design a $12.5 million building, but it's not going to be what your department needs. So that was the answer that was given. There were points in time, I think, during this process where by we, I mean me, arbitrarily cut square footage and then realized I couldn't cut that because then I wasn't meeting building code. I mean, there were things that occurred along the way that attempted to get us closer to. I don't know if Anthony or Trevor, if you guys want to weigh in on the bidding things, you don't have to. I just haven't experienced bidding anything at 60%, so I can't speak. Anthony?
No, you wouldn't be able to bid it at 60%, not getting firm numbers from subcontractors at least. But I think, this is my personal opinion. I look back at some of the reports from Five Bugles, and I think, honestly, the problem is their initial budgets per square foot were just not high enough. I know a lot of this design is similar to another fire station that the committee liked. And, that station back in 2016, 2017 cost $260 a square foot. That's, 7 years ago, and that's, a good 40 to 50% inflation ago. So if you start doing that math, that puts you up closer to like $390. When we did this budget, we sent it out to some subcontractors. These aren't binding numbers, mind you, but it came back now in our budget's about $373 a square foot, which is frankly kind of what I expected it to be at. So these aren't firm numbers, but there is a lot of data behind them. Essentially this is the situation where you take this type of number and make a decision like this is something we're going to fund and go with, or we have to cut back or add to or whatnot. But we have a pretty high level of confidence that we're going to be able to live within, this budget, whatever you decide to borrow. That's basically our job. And, as we come in, we talked about alternates before and providing some flexibility when bids come in to, move that up or down as far as needs versus wants. That's all going to be built into the process. But really, I think the big problem is the initial assumption that was thrown out there in that initial report was frankly too low. And in real time, that inflation was going, there was one 12-month period where it was about 21% from what I've read. So part of it is, maybe designers and architects weren't quite up to speed, if you will, with real time, what those costs were doing. So I think that might have been part of the problem.
What else do you have? You said oodles. That was one.
That's good enough. I'm wondering when somebody's going to guarantee this number. And what I'm hearing is we'll guarantee it in April. So we'll be back here talking about this again. That's what I'm afraid of.
I think
because ultimately the 10 people sitting at the table are the ones going to be held accountable for the price.
I think the goal, as you said, is to not come back in April. Do you want to speak to the approach that you suggested? And how that integrates to that question of coming back?
The rationale for the 14 versus the 13 is to hit that very question with the answer. I don't feel comfortable coming back a third time. This is a second time already. and all. And by building in alternates to some of the different aspects of the project is that ability to make the solution a decision of finance and full council, if that's what it takes, at the point of the bid opening. So in my mind, that bid opening day doesn't have any decisions that we walk away with. It causes us to have a meeting to say, now here's the numbers, what do you want to do about it? And go from there so that it's not being asked a third time.
I saw hands, yes.
So I have a question for our contractors, if they can answer it. How much of this inflationary cost is commodity driven? Because the construction market over the last several years has had some very unrealistic achievements in regards to spikes in inflation costs because of decreased production, because of related shortages and shutdowns of factories across the country. Now we're seeing that pinch, and now it's been opened back up, but some of those numbers are still artificially inflated to make up for the lost income in those industries. So with this estimate at 45%, how much of that is commodity driven in regards to raw construction material that you're getting? And how much of that is artificially inflated that is being used to make up for lost income over the last 3 years? Because I know it's part of the industry that I've tracked.
For sure. That's a big economic question. I can do my best to answer it. For an example, it's a pretty easy example to wrap your head around. Ready-mix concrete per yard in Watertown has gone from about $80, $85 a cubic yard to more like $135, $140 a cubic yard over the last 3 or 4 years. It's obviously a significant increase. Lumber spiked, it came back down. There's not much lumber, frankly, relatively speaking, in a fire station. Steel has spiked and kind of remained elevated. So trying to tell you how much of that 45% was commodities is tough. Obviously some of it's labor, as we all know in the labor market. Raises have been higher, or retaining bonuses, whatever you want to talk about in labor has been higher. And then you have obviously materials, and then as you mentioned, you have contractor markup is another factor there. And you're right, frankly, the last 3 years, with as much demand as there's been, and relatively not enough supply of contractors to keep up with that demand, there is some of that built in. I would be guessing if I was trying to break down that 45 into how much of that is what, but they're both factors.
I got another one.
Yes.
So, Mark, you just said something that I thought was interesting. We're going to open bids in March. What's the contractual relationship you're looking at? Are we hiring a general contractor in March?
No, the general, if you will, is Moss Brothers.
So what bids are we opening in March?
Individual packages. So they'll lump together individual packages as the contract manager, and those will go out to bid. So it's not that Moss Brothers is the only one that is, they're not doing all self-perform work.
So it would be an electrical package, a concrete package, is that what you mean?
Yeah, what I'm trying to understand, though, is that, so we have electrical work that needs to be done in the building, and we will send a package out for the electrical pieces of the building,
Yes.
and we'll receive bids back.
Correct.
And then with Moss, we'll make a decision as to which electrical contractor we're going to use.
Correct.
Okay.
Public bids, typically, almost overwhelmingly, it's going to be the low bidder. If they're able to submit a bid and have like a bid bond with that, it's almost a straightforward low bidder. If we obviously had a concern about someone not being able to meet the project needs, we'd speak up. But really, it's probably going to be, I'm guessing, 20 bid packages plus or minus. Starting with site work, concrete, masonry, steel materials, steel erection, overhead doors, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to have basically a bid opening with like 20 different bid packages, and hopefully, at least 3 or 4 bidders in each one of those bid packages.
Yes.
Now, this is from Moss. Were you able to get a hold of the questions I sent Chief Tess yesterday, or no?
Chief? I'm going to let Chief answer that because it looks like he wants to.
Yeah, they're working on it. The Mark Zavidkowitz from SCH is trying to figure out how to put that extra square foot onto that cold storage, and then how does that lay onto the site?
I think
with
one
that
of the
square
questions
footage on
is
there.
cost, and without being able to put a pencil into detail on exactly what it is, I think you're probably looking at pretty close to a wash there. If you took that square footage from eliminate the basement and then added it to that exterior storage building, depending on what that storage building ends up exactly being built out of, I think that's gonna be pretty close to a wash. So the question kind of remains whether what the impact is on the site as far as layout, and I kind of deferred to the architects on that, and we're kind of awaiting their feedback.
Anybody else on this topic? Oh,
I have questions on this topic, and Chief Tester and I had a very lengthy conversation on this week in regards to some of the concerns on some of the things that were cut and the ROIs that go with them. I actually am concerned about your estimate of that being a wash because I have a hard time accepting the fact that it's a wash to remove storage space and square footage in a basement setting to an above-ground addition to a building when if I added a 200 square foot addition to my basement, it's going to cost me significantly more than a 200 square foot building in my backyard. So I have concerns in regards to that math, but I'm also concerned about the ROI in regards to some of these add-on packages potentially being in there because this is our one shot to do it right. And so my concern is if we're cutting the wrong corners or the wrong amounts, we're going to look back in 5 or 10 years and we're all going to regret it. And 2020,
Yeah,
I want to
so-
get to that point to make sure it's right the first time.
Yeah, so to speak to the basement versus the storage specifically, that basement's relatively small as it's designed right now. I think it's like 1,700 square feet, somewhere in there if I remember. So to build a basement, obviously the basement itself isn't that expensive, but you're building stuff like the stairway down there, the excavation, especially in an issue where we have soils already. You're taking basically a whole scope, not whole scope, but like a whole portion of that building out of there. Because that basement is just extra work to dig, get stairs down to, whatever. That storage building is relatively cheap space, whether it's a pre-engineered metal building or a steel siding with wood frame pole type building. I mean, if you're taking an existing building and you're just adding on to it, you're getting some economy of scale there. If you start adding a bunch of overhead doors along with that square footage, then it might start changing the math. But really, it's pretty cheap to add on to an exterior storage building like that, or at least to add while you're building it to add space to it. I mean, if you came back later and did an addition, obviously building a basement would be much more expensive after the fact versus putting an addition onto exterior building. But making that decision ahead of time, there's not going to be a drastic cost difference if that square footage moves from a basement to part of that exterior storage building.
But my question is, and my concern is this, you just said it's cheaper. I mean, I guess which is it? Is it cheaper to have 1,700 square foot in a basement or 1,700 square foot added to a steel building on the outside?
I'm saying it's pretty close to a wash.
I can't accept that as reality because it's far more expensive to put a basement in than just add square footage onto a steel building above ground where there is no basement. So I'd love to see those numbers to see how that realistically plays out because I don't buy that one.
they're working on that, right? Okay. And then on the value engineering items, Chief, would you mind speaking a little bit to how we got to those? We didn't force you. Like, there was an active participation with the
Yeah.
fire department.
Yep, so the fire department, architect firm, construction manager, finance, the mayor, we all sat down and really started to look at where we can start cutting some high-ticket items, and one of them was the removal of the basement. That was about a $250,000 savings. Another one was changing the stone veneer look on the bottom layer to a larger brick look. Another one mentioned was changing the door layout. We wanted the four-fold doors because they open and close quick, help with response time. We thought, well, maybe we can take them off the back. When we're going back into the station, they don't need to be as quick, keeping them on the front going out so we still have our primary response times. Self-performing some of the...
And the garage. We missed, that was the big one.
Yeah.
The,
We cut off the staff car garage, thinking that, we live in Wisconsin, we have nice springs, summer, fall. Those cars can still remain outside, not ideal. And in the winter, if it is icy or snowing, if we had the cold storage building, they could go inside there during those colder months.
And then the self-performing, sorry.
And then self-performing some of the site work, using some city crews to haul some of the crushed gravel out, take some of the bad soils out, bring in the good soils, and landscaping and those types of things.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, I know those are all the things that we talked about on the phone very extensively. So 2 questions on that. The training tower came up, and that's going to be as originally designed, if I understand it correctly?
The training tower right now is in as a pre-engineered facility.
The pre-engineered facility, we took off the single-story part and went to just the 2-story part that would kind of represent like a typical 2-story house we'd find here in Watertown, and then the 4-story portion for some of the apartment buildings we have that are that high.
Is that an add alternate? So it's an alternate.
Okay. I'd like to see that with the single-story option, just so we have a proper training, because if we're going to do it right, I want to do it right. Because I know the training, the on-site training was the big reason why we're doing this in the first place, is to get the Tier 1 rating. The other question I had relating to the doors, it's not a convenience thing to me, it's an ROI thing. How much difference is a door going to cost versus long-term longevity of replacing the other ones versus the amount we're going to lose in heat expenditures over the course of lifetime? Because those are all things that factor into overall cost versus expenditures on the doors.
Chief?
Yep. So that company that makes those 4-fold doors has a whole thing on how they calculate heat loss and stuff in the winter months, and also they're guaranteed for like 1 million openings. There's literally no maintenance on those doors other than getting out once a year with a grease erk and putting a little grease in the hinge parts. There's no lining a track, no problems with roller pins. It's pretty much a maintenance-free door. That's why a lot of departments have gone to them.
Mr. Lampe?
I would just note that for anybody here who wants to kind of follow along, the last finance meeting, the very first one we had in November, I mean, a lot of this stuff is covered line by line in the packet. And so, for example, like the one item we have here, in terms of the self-performing work, that was a total of $195,000 saved. In terms of the value engineering, that was a total of $1.1 million and another $85,000 on top of that for the value engineering. And the 4 back doors as part of that was $100,000. If I'm just reading down the memo here.
Other comments?
Are you looking for anything tonight?
I was going to see if anyone had any comments, and I was going to couch it for us, if that's okay. So if there's no other comments, I'll just say, so, no, we don't have to, right? Like, we'll pass a budget on the 21st. What I'm glad we were able to do, though, is have discussion around the need. So as it's budgeted right now, we would more than likely, if the estimates are true, not be able to construct the station. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you're wanting to see that number, if you will, found themselves in a lot of hurt because they wanted back in and it was going to be cost prohibitive. Unfortunately, the bid that I got, and it was from one of our players, Dean is one of our insurance companies that we work with. They would not provide to me more than a 1-year guarantee pricing on the premiums. And if I had been a foreteller, I probably would have jumped at it anyways because we've got a 14.6% increase. So it's anybody's game, but unfortunately, I'm learning ETF doesn't like you to leave, and they're going to fee you back in.
It's the highest percentage I've been a part of in over a decade. They're normally around 6 to 8%. I've never experienced one this high.
The reason for that question is for a couple reasons. First and foremost, so when we get the angry email of why it's going up so much, we know where to direct that aggression towards the state level representation who approved this nonsense.
ETF board. ETF they're not technically a cabinet agency, I don't think. Yeah.
Well, however that works.
Yeah, so I don't really inadvertently blame the senator.
Right, but it sounds like legalized racketeering and extortion money. I'm going to call it for what it is, because our taxpayers are going to be bent because we're telling we got to increase 14.5%. That's completely out of our control.
Well, I want to be careful on the impact to the taxpayer. You're right that the cost is ridiculous. Right now, the general fund levy is increasing $60,000 across the entire community, which is the lowest Is that right? The lowest percentage,
It's the lowest increase of our levy in the last 10 years.
and whether it's what you're describing or this fire station, that doesn't change,
But it's,
right, Mark?
yeah, I'm glad and I'm very impressed it's as low as it is and it's as good as it is. But this is one of those expenditures that frustrates me to no end
Oh.
because we have zero control over it and I don't like being extorted and going back to my constituents and saying, I'm sorry, I can do nothing about this.
I hear
That
you.
Doesn't
Yeah.
set well.
I mean,
with me.
when we talked about the budget, there was a group of people that certainly wanted to make sure we could achieve our goals and keep the or the levy ask as low as possible. There was a group of people that wanted relief right away. I wanted to do both, but 400K right off the top of the cake in order to do health insurance made that very, very difficult. So I hear you completely.
I'm not one when it comes to like insurance to go, well, I just want the cheapest one if it's going to sacrifice the benefits to the ones who are using it. So I understand that there's a value to paying for services, but I don't like being extorted unnecessarily for that. So this is
Understood.
where my constraint is. So
Understood. Anybody else on general budget stuff? So I'll just kind of end this portion of the discussion with one disclaimer. If you have anything between now and the 21st that's bigger, we actually have to pass a budget on the 21st. We have to calculate tax bills, like there's a chain of events that happens after. So if you have any ideas you're kicking around, please talk to Mark so that he can appropriately prepare any estimates ahead of time so that we make sure that you all feel comfortable and informed to pass budgets on the 21st. Agree on that one? Okay.
And I do want to highlight that it's best between now and next Wednesday.
Oh, stop that. I forgot about that. Mark will be out of town. So please heed that advice.
Cancel.
We do have a pretty terrible history in this community of people attempting to go on vacation and then not actually getting to be on vacation. So hopefully that doesn't work, or doesn't happen this time. Okay, any last things on the budget before we switch to another really exciting one? Okay, I'm going to switch gears. I apologize that this was added. I wish it wasn't. Janelle, why don't you start making your way up here? I'm not kidding you guys. Yesterday, I don't know, whatever time I emailed Stephen and Megan and said, hey, can we please hurry up and amend the council agenda? I got a question from the DOT. And I also was informed by the DOT that they did not bid the project on November 9th. The looks on your faces are the same look I had.
What?
A project that has gathered the attention of the governor, the senator, the Joint Committee on Finance, the DOT Secretary's office, you keep going, was moved without me being formally informed as the chief executive of this community. And I shared my discontentment with DOT in that yesterday in an email. They have yet to respond to that. But they did not bid the project on December 9th. I asked them 3 times if their plans are done. They have refrained from answering that question. And I also asked why they made that choice, and they've also refrained from asking that question. I said, what can I tell my council? They are going to ask me why, and they have not answered that question. So I want to start this conversation with that, because if I'm you, I'm sitting here percolating on those exact questions. I wish I could have answers for you. I don't know. But what they asked me is what the 2 timeline options that are sitting on your desk that's what they've asked me to answer. They said, well, Mayor, we want to know if you want this or this. And I said, well, I'm not deciding that on my own. So I need to be able to speak to you all about that. I'm not going to ask Jean Ellen to step through every piece of this memo. You all have had it sitting in front of you. I don't want to waste people's time on that. What is essentially being asked of us is option 1, for the purposes of those in the audience. Do we want to start the project later in '24 because DOT did not bid the project yet? And no, it will not be complete in one construction season. That means the bridge will remain closed during the winter of '24-25. So hypothetically, they start sometime in the summer, they work till the snow flies, they shut down the job, and then they start again when they can start constructing. That extends the time the bridge is closed. Or option 2, do you want to start the work in 2025 and complete the project in that typical time frame? Again, that would be April-ish to November-ish from everything they've told us. That results in less time for the bridge being closed. A couple of things hinge on that. I'm sure, I think it may be pertinent just to touch a little bit on the Masonic Temple. I know you touched on it in an outline, but as of Friday, we had a bid close. So can you just take us from Friday to today?
So we rebid the project for the Masonic Temple to be stabilized, and we received one bid on Friday, and initially it looked as if it would come in under the $2 million earmark, but they did not include the $200,000 contingency that is set up for any changes that are discovered in the field, because we have a lot of unknowns going into this project. And when you add back in the contingency and the vibration monitoring that the state is requiring, it pushes the project to just around, just under 2.1 million. So it would be $100,000 short to, if any of the contingency is used, or I should say if all the contingency is used, we could potentially be over the $2 million earmark. This is for contract one. This is for stabilizing the Masonic Temple building and also detaching the basement extension that lies under the sidewalk out in the public right-of-way. There is a contract two that will go along with this project. We do have work that we need to do on the northwest quadrant by Bank First. That has to be done prior to the bridge being demolished. And also under contract two, there will be work done once the state contract is let and the contractor has his cofferdam and dewatering system set up for the bridge project on the east abutment. There is additional removal of the foundation that sits under that sidewalk that has to be removed to bedrock. And we've estimated that contract two work could cost up to upwards of $300,000. And so we believe that if you add contract one with contract two costs, we could be at 2.4 million. And again, the earmark was for 2 million.
So what we ultimately need, because I need to give them an answer by tomorrow, is which option you all would like me to respond with. I don't even know what more context to provide. Yeah, go ahead.
So in the first case, thank you for bearing with us, I don't know whom to, on those rebid packages. I mean, getting to 2.4 total with the 2 million basically in hand is fantastic. I think that if we're looking at potential options where we're looking at, potentially investing another $400,000 in that area, and keeping that area pretty much looking the way that it is, I think there's a lot of people who'd be very happy with that piece. In terms of the timeline options, I'm kind of relaying more than I am providing my own opinion here, in terms of, sort of the opinion of a lot of the business owners down Main Street that are being collected by someone you know and like a whole lot. Very much in favor of option two, where there's the compressed time frame and there's the minimum disruption of businesses downtown. So very, very much not in favor of option one in terms of downtown businesses, very much in favor of option two to minimize that total disruption so you don't have seasonal traffic flows or anything that essentially disrupts the important holiday season.
Yes.
I would agree that not dragging a construction of a bridge over multiple seasons and doing it in one is probably more advantageous. My only concern is, in its current state, will it make it? I mean, I get a lot of complaints about a giant metal plate in the middle of the bridge that's already having issues. If it doesn't make it, what's the change? Are they going to start work at that point, or are we going to be still stuck at 25 with a giant hole in our bridge that's going to be closed anyways? That's
latter.
my concern. Yeah, that's
the latter will happen.
And that's my big concern in regards to, I'm going to be blunt, their ineptness to build this, or to bid it. You can put the heat around on me on that one, I don't care, but if they said they're going to do something they don't, that puts us in a very hard spot that we have to come back to and pull a rabbit out of our hat.
They didn't even say, like, hey, just so you know, we're not going to do this. It just happened.
Yeah.
At least to me, they didn't. It just happened. I want to be careful. So could you speak to the step down approach on the bridge limitation. So we get the bridge inspected every 6 months. I want to be very clear for the public and anyone paying attention that bridge is inspected for safety every 6 months. We have seen degradation in each of those reports, so that's continuing. The bridge is from 1932. I mean, that's going to happen. But as of right now, the bridge is safe for the traffic that's posted for travel. Can we predict a year into the future to know? I can't, and neither can Jane Ellen.
So what the state is saying to us is that they believe the condition of the bridge, it is their opinion, although we cannot get it in writing, their opinion is that the bridge will continue to delaminate, and they see that the holding off, say, to 2025 construction, most likely the worst the city would see is that the weight limit that has been placed on it, which is 20 ton, would be reduced. So we already have semi-truck traffic and some of our large fire response equipment not able to use the bridge. What would happen is that at some point it would probably be just small vehicles. Large pickup trucks, 1-ton pickup trucks would be eliminated from using the bridge. It would just bring down that weight limit and again reduce what type of vehicle can cross it safely.
Yes.
So 1-ton trucks, that's a lot of SUVs and the heavier vehicles on the road. Electric vehicles probably wouldn't be able to use that bridge because those have a very higher weight than a regular car. I can certainly understand wanting to have a compressed time frame and do this in 1 year. The concern I have is what if there's a construction delay and it gets pushed into 2 years anyway, which is certainly something that could happen. And as Alderman Schmidt said, there's a lot of concerns with the degradation of the bridge, and even though we're getting the reports that are telling us it's this slow degradation, something can happen. You know, an overweight truck could go over that, ignore the detour and go over that and cause significant damage. And we're getting into a pretty severe safety concern with it. And again, like I said, I agree I want this done in the shortest time frame possible, but at the same time, with the condition it's in, I think we need to get started on this project as soon as possible. So I would be in favor of option 1. I don't know if you're looking for a motion for direction or if you just want comment.
What is later in 2024?
So what has been relayed to us most recently is with them missing the November 9th letting, that they would be looking at the earliest at an April letting, a March letting, which could start the bridge as soon as May, which is only 1 month delay, but it could be a March, April, or May, or even possibly a June letting. They are not pinning themselves down at this point with when they would advertise this project out for bid. They're giving us a range.
And what if they drop the ball again?
Yeah.
The state could drop the ball again in 2025, and then we're looking at 2026. I just think we should push to get this started as soon as possible.
I will eventually need one, but I'm fine with discussion continuing. Yeah.
Are we suggesting that we go ahead with the decoupling of the Masonic Temple regardless?
Yes.
Yes, we would go. We would do contract 1 regardless of whether it would be a 2024 start or 2025. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
2025 start.
Yeah.
2025. That number. We would move ahead with contract 1. We were hoping to time contract 2 to go out for bid when the state does advertise the bridge project, in hopes that the contractors who will bid on the deconstruction and reconstruction of the bridge would be interested in contract 2, and hopefully we could save some on mobilization costs and things like that and kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But contract 1, we will move forward. If this happens, we will move forward immediately with the project, because that is a requirement for them to go out for bid, not to go out for bid, for their project to start, we must have contract 1 completed.
So that would go to Finance Committee, that contract would, and then to Council.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
But, you know, it's a $2 million earmark all in between contract 1 and contract 2. Again, in my mind, contract 2 is like the northwest side.
And there's some work on the northeast
And
side.
some work on the northeast side. We will have to most likely find additional funding at this point, right? Like, we're thinking maybe a couple $100,000. I think I heard you, when we were speaking at 6 o'clock, it was 200,000. By 9 o'clock, it was around, I know you
400.
guys all spoke though and finessed, worked on numbers a little bit. So there will be some, but when, I don't know. Because if it's not till 2025, well then maybe it's not anything that happens this year. So that's why these all sequence together. And DOT is looking for assurances from us in writing pertaining to this decoupling and pertaining to Project 2. How much they stick to all of those things in order to actually start is another thing.
So they won't
Funny how
give, they won't
assurances
give
of the
us
state are a
anything.
one-way street.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to tell them that.
Yeah. So it, without being a conspiracy theorist, they wanted to start in 2025. It looks like they want to back us into the corner and just say start
I don't
in
think the design is
2025.
done. I don't think it's done. That's my hunch. The fact that they won't answer my question, I can't be led to believe anything different. I hope I'm wrong, but that's, by you not answering my question, my thought is the design isn't done, therefore you can't bid the project. Therefore, city, you know, what do you want? I haven't been asked, what do I want? One time during this process. Yeah.
If you're looking for a motion, I'd like to make a motion that the city pursue option 1 to get this project moving as soon as possible.
Is there a second to that?
I have an additional question before that.
Does anyone want to second it, though? Because we have a motion out.
Second that,
Okay.
actually.
Sir?
So, not to muddy the water, but I've encountered this group before, and depending on which Messianic temple this is, it could get really hinky in regards to if it was abandoned or sanctioned for demolish, because some of them do review it as a religious organization. So I only want to caution Terry on that one, how we proceed forward in regards to them not coming back and being upset over the issue. They might come back and say, here, let us help you, and here's some money to help, because they're very civic-minded in regards to that regards. But I do know
It's not currently a Masonic temple.
it's not, so it's been
Privately
abandoned?
owned. It's
Okay.
privately owned.
Okay.
And I don't want to speak for you, but we've been talking to the owner for 6 months trying to figure this out.
Okay. And it might be reaching out to them and seeing if they'll,
The
help.
temple?
Yeah.
If you have contact information, I can reach out to them. I know nothing about the Masonic Temple organization, but I've learned a lot during this bridge process, so, yeah.
So the one other thing in the sequencing I think we want to revisit here is the Katy Street Bridge, which I believe is now done.
Yes.
Okay, so that's basically, we did that reinforcing, as I understand it, so we have an alternate transportation route for fire and everything else into the downtown area that's basically 2-3 blocks away. So there's an element in terms of, degradation of bridge and taking that weight limit down. It's not like we're shutting the downtown off from freight. We still have, as far as I know, I want to speak for the fire department again, a northern exit essentially out that direction and a southern exit out through Milwaukee, worst case. And the other thing that I'm kind of hearing here in terms of the 2025 date is that if we're looking for like date certain, and the state is starting to push us like toward the 2025, this is another case where we don't want to come back multiple times again and try to move dates around. So put a pin in 2025, okay, it's not what we wanted. But potentially it's something that we can plan for better than a 2024 date that might move again.
No matter what vote you take tonight, it's very likely it will move again.
Yeah.
There's been absolutely nothing about this project that has stayed on course. Any other, yeah.
For the degradation, if we wanted to preemptively reduce the weight allowance to try to, in an attempt to try to slow the degradation of the bridge, to try to mitigate some of that risk of possible issues, is that going to be something that comes back to like public safety, or is that something the street department can do without us inputting?
Can we reduce the weight limit on the bridge on our own?
I feel like you did before.
I've never done that.
Oh.
Like proactively?
I think we're proactively doing what we need to do right now with the 6-month checkups.
I think, let's say this. She has been in this field for how long? Long time. many decades,
41
hasn't done it, let us
years
think about
plus.
it.
That's why I'm
How
asking.
about that? Let us,
Yep.
rather than you shoot off the cuff after a career of never doing it, let's think it through and see if there's something that we can do. Yep, I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Question. Now, Main Street is technically a state highway.
It's a
A
connecting
The
highway.
state
It's a
would have to be
connecting state
involved in
highway.
setting that limit, wouldn't they?
That's why I
Yeah, we
let us think that one through. Yep, yeah.
don't have an answer.
Your point is a valid one, so that's why I said, let us think about that. We'll investigate it and see if that's an option. They seem to have a lot of opportunity to be involved on Main Street. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, Mayor and the engineering team, you all fulfilled your promise. You said we would do everything we could to get this done, and you're to be commended, because I know that was a tremendous amount of work. It's disappointing, but I want to express appreciation for the work you put into this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We end every week with something terrible about the bridge. So, anybody else on this? We have a motion and a second to pursue option one. Can I just say, obviously if this changes, it'll just be then option two? I mean, I think we're all agreeing. What I'm hearing is as soon as possible, right?
Right.
Right? Whoever seconded, I'm hearing as soon as possible. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Looking at the construction season, you're going to be dealing in the middle of winter with snow, ice, whatever. Wouldn't it be better to keep it in 1 year, in 2025, than to deal with the snow plowing and everything else that goes along with winter?
That's what's being asked here. That's the question before you is, right now we have a motion to proceed with option one, which is 2024. You would be describing option two. And I will, yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, I see this as just a strategy move, like, okay, you're not going to do it, you didn't put it out, but we want it as soon as possible. And again, we're out, it could be 25 when it happens.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think we need to keep pushing, because if we don't, and then we do get to 2025,
And it gets-
and the state forgets about us again, then we're looking at 2026. I just want to keep this on the front burner so we don't keep getting pushed off.
I agree. Okay. So right now, we have I'm going to ask Megan to take the roll in a moment. We have a motion and a second to proceed with option one as described in the memo from our city engineer. Megan?
Blanky.
Aye.
Smith. Schmid.
Aye.
Wetzel. Moldenhauer.
No.
Davis.
Aye.
Lampy.
No.
Board. Motion passed 5-3.
All right. Thank you, Jane Ellen. Thank you all. Was that the wrong count?
6-2.
Every once in a while, you have these nights where, but you know what? I'll give you the same out. It's 9-12, so it happens. Thank you for checking us. Thank you, Jane Ellen. All right, we do have a closed session, so in a moment, I'm going to kick you all out of this room very politely. It is, I believe, a fairly brief one. We went through it in finance in about 5 minutes. So I'm going to take a motion to go to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Paren 1, Paren G, to confer with the city attorney, who's going to be rendering oral or written advice concerning a strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. This pertains to Yago versus the city of Watertown. Is there a motion to go to close? Mr. Board, Mr. Smith. Megan, will you please take the roll?
Board.
Yes.
Blanky. Smith. Schmid. Wetzel. Moldenhauer. Davis. Lampy.
You can stay or leave.
Motion passed
Normally
8-0.
It's up to you. Wait. Can you please leave? We're in closed session. And yes, you'll have to step out as well. You can leave if you'd like to. It's up to you. Mr. Smith? Questions on the accounts? Megan?
Moldenhauer,
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Lampy. Board.
Aye.
Blanky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Wetzel.
Aye.
Motion passed 8-0.
Thank you. Next is just an FYI around the credit card purchases over $10,000. Questions from anybody on those? All right. Then next, under miscellaneous business, is the payroll summary from October 4th to 17th and 18th to 31st. Comments or questions for anyone on that? All right, then let's move to licenses. You have a memo in your packet from the clerk that pertains to items B, C, and D, but we'll take those separate. So the first is to review and take action on an agent change for the American Legion. This is changing it from Robert Hamburger to Steven Zilmer. Is there a motion on this one? Mr. Smith?
Move for the approval of the agent change for the American Legion.
Thank you. Motion by Smith.
Second.
By Mr. Blanky. Questions or comments from anybody? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, very good. The next is to take action on an application for a Class B malt and liquor license. This is for Danny's Poorhouse doing business as Poor Decisions. This is located at 715 West Main Street, and this was the one that had conditional approval by the licensing board. Is there a motion on this one?
So moved.
So a motion to approve as long as the conditions are met?
Yes.
Okay, motion by Mr. Blanky, second by Mr. Smith. Comments or questions? Mr. Lampy?
Location?
Yes.
Yes.
Are they, I remember this came up when I first joined the council a while back. Is there any,
Does zoning sign off in your sign-offs? So yes, there was a zoning issue at that time, and there's a checklist Megan puts all these through, and zoning would have approved. They had a PUD.
okay, so we're still
Yep.
within the bounds of that?
Yep,
All right.
good question.
Thank you.
Anybody else on this one? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, and then last is an application for an operator license for Jessica Ratz. This was a recommended denial by the licensing board. Mr. Smith?
Move for the denial of the operator's license requested by this applicant.
A motion to deny by Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Lampy. Questions? Comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, let's go to ordinances. This is ordinance 23-23. This is to amend section 500-10D in our city code. This is here from Ms. Davis in Public Safety and Welfare on its second reading. Ms. Davis?
I'll move for ordinance 23-23.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Board. Comments or questions from anybody? Mr. Lampy?
Was this the one that was amended last time?
Yes.
Okay. We're good with what's on the page?
Mhm.
Okay.
Anybody else? Megan?
Davis. Lampy. Board.
Aye.
Blanky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Wetzel.
Aye.
Moldenhauer.
Aye.
Motion passed 8-0.
Very good. Let's go to resolutions. The first is Exhibit 90-546. This is a resolution to enter into an MOU with the Wisconsin Election Commission. This is pertaining to Badger Book, electronic poll books, and the associated software. This is here for me and the Finance Committee.
I'll move for 95.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Wetzel, second by Mr. Lampy. Questions for the clerk on this one? Yes?
Are we statutorily obligated to use these things?
No? We can use them. We don't have to use them.
Okay. Because I get a lot of complaints about the electronic things.
The poll books?
Yes.
It's not voting, it's signing. Might help, in case people aren't sure.
Yeah.
Okay. This is just the contract to use what we have. Any other comments or questions? Voice vote is fine. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, let's go to our next. This is Exhibit 9547. This is a resolution to approve the Lebanon EMS service coverage for 2024. Here for me and Finance. Mr. Board? Motion by Mr. Board, second by Mr. Schmidt. Questions for the chief? Megan?
Board.
Yes.
Blanky.
Aye.
Smith. Schmidt. Wetzel. Moldenhauer. Davis. Lampy. Motion passed 8-0.
Thank you. Next is Exhibit 9548. This is a resolution to modify the 23 Economic Development budget. This is here for me and the Finance Committee. Not all of you at once. Mr. Blanky.
I'll move for Resolution 9548.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Board. Comments or questions?
And if I understand it correctly, it's redoing the study to accommodate for post-COVID operations regards to the hospitality hotel industry.
Yep.
Okay.
Anybody else? Megan?
Blanky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Schmid.
Aye.
Wetzel. Moldenhauer. Davis. Lampy.
Aye.
Board.
Aye.
Motion passed 8-0.
Thank you. Next is Exhibit 9549. This is a resolution to honor the retirement of Chief Kaminsky. This is here for me.
So move.
Mr. Moldenhauer? Motion by Moldenhauer, second by Mr. Blanky. I told him that it was going to be a long one. He didn't have to stick around for it, so we don't have to read it out loud. We all agreed. Anybody have anything to comment on? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, then our last exhibit is 9550. This is a resolution to authorize participation in the cooperative planning process pursuant to Wisconsin statute 66.0307. This is here for me and the Plan Commission.
Move for Resolution 9550.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Blanky, second by Mr. Moldenhauer. This gives us the permission, this kind of lays the groundwork and gives us the permission to continue the conversations with the town of Emmett. Does that sound okay? For a summary of a very long resolution?
That is what it does, yes.
Thank you.
So
Questions?
it just continues the conversation because I've got a lot of blowback on this one.
It allows us to formally both say, because we're going to submit this to the state then, where we're telling that, and these other surrounding areas, we're working this thing over.
This is notifying the state as well as the surrounding communities that the two municipalities are going to enter into discussions about potentially amending the boundary agreement.
We're telling them we're talking.
Okay.
Yep.
So I know what to tell people when they come back at me.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of overly distilled in that phrase, but you get the point. Questions, comments?
Just
Yes.
one.
Yep.
Sorry to make
No,
this
it's okay.
longer. Does this then extend our timeline for the drop dead date that is in that extraterritorial agreement?
Yes and no. This itself does not extend the timeline.
What a great answer.
What a lawyerly answer.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't say, I can argue that either way.
It doesn't extend the timeline yet. If the parties enter into an agreement later on, that could extend the timeline. But as of right now, the agreement will continue to proceed. As of September of next year, the parties would be annexed into the city and would have the one-year obligation. This gets us on target to hopefully address it before that occurs.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Do you want the roll? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we are now at the point in our agenda, we can take comments from those that are present. Anyone online? All right, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Schmidt, second by Mr. Moldenhauer. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, we are are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Now I'm the one screwing up my words. Yeah. And the baby is born. Yeah, the baby is here.
Any budget changes besides that?
It's a boy.